Well, most authors do realize that they don't write perfectly. I certainly don't. It's very important in this day and age to have your work professionally edited, polished. Even if you're just submitting to agents or publishing companies because you want to get traditionally published, you're competing against hundreds of thousands of other writers, and editors will tell you that if they have 2 great books on their desk and one of them is really sloppy and needs a lot of work and needs to be cleaned up a lot, and they have another manuscript that's equally as good and it's already been professionally edited and it's like perfect, ready to go, they'll take that one. And they'll tell you in no uncertain terms that that really makes a difference. And especially with authors that are self-publishing now, and they're going to put their book, upload it to an ebook on Amazon or Smashwords or wherever they're going, they really need to know that that book is error-free, because if you have a lot of mistakes in your book, it's going to really show, and you're going to get a lot of criticism, and then it's kind of hard to unlive that once you've experienced that. So you want to put your best work out there. You want to show that you care enough about your writing and your work that you'll put the time and the money expense into hiring an editor. And I specialize in manuscript critiques, and that's mostly what I do about 90% of my time now, because so many authors really need their work critiqued first. They really need the whole story deconstructed and examined to see whether it holds up. And most copy editors can correct grammar and fix a sentence, but they don't have the writing background that I do, or per se maybe some other editors might, that are also novelists. So I would encourage a novelist that's looking with a first-time book, has never really had it critiqued with a critique team or critique partners, to really seriously consider getting a manuscript critique first, which will give you hundreds and hundreds of comments to address all your major components of your novel, before you spend the money to have all your punctuation fixed, because that's the icing on the cake. You don't want to put beautiful, tasty icing on a really yucky tasting cake. It's just not going to work. You want to make sure your cake is like perfect and delicious first, and then you can ice it. So that's kind of how I look at it. So highly recommend taking the time and the money, and think of this as an investment. I mean, you're investing years of your time writing a book, so why wouldn't you want to invest whatever money it will take to get that book as perfect as you can make it, something you can be proud of forever. Once it's out there, that's your name's on it.
People should get a professional editor because of the word professional, because they will have been familiar with the methods of editing, they will be familiar with the world of books, they will have been readers, maybe they will have been reviewers, maybe they will have been editors at a publishing house, so they know what a manuscript is supposed to look like, and they're in that world. So that's a real important reason to use a professional editor. And also because it says that you are serious about your work and your writing.
Writers might think that a publisher is going to edit their book and everything will be fine. And that is the old way things were done that way for years. If you sold your book to a traditional publisher, the publisher would edit the book. It would be a good reflection on the publisher and a good reflection on the editor, and the readers would not be interrupted by errors and mistakes that made it look like the author didn't know what he or she was doing. Things have changed, and especially in self-publishing now. So the big thing about editing is most of the traditional publishers even want you to have your book edited before you turn it in, or they won't accept it. They are looking at the bottom line. They don't want to. They no longer have full-time manuscript editors on staff. They use individual independent editors if they're going to pay an editor at all. But if they get an edited book and they don't have to pay someone to edit it, that book is more appealing to them. In addition, if you're self-publishing, you absolutely have to have a professional editor, not your wife, not your girlfriend, not your old English teacher, because there's a difference between editing a book and editing a school essay and that sort of thing. There's a big difference, and you need to use a book editor because the book will be more marketable. More people will want to buy it if it's written well and there are not a lot of mistakes in it. Yes, there may be one or two mistakes because we are human, but you don't want glaring, obvious, embarrassing mistakes. And if you're going to spend your money to self-publish something, you certainly don't want to waste your money by publishing something that is not a good reflection on you.
Most writers, when they start, including me, type the end. They get a friend to check out grammar. They do a little spell check, and then they send it off to agents. And that works for some people. That is enough for some people. They do land a publishing contract. So yay! However, others of us don't. And that's when, if you've sent it out a couple times and you haven't gotten any feedback, you haven't heard back, you might want to look at an editor to help figure out what is holding this story back. Because I'll tell you something. Most writers have great stories. The problem is in the execution. It's just that elements haven't been brought out, things are in the wrong order, things are in the wrong emphasis, so that the reader, the agent or publisher, doesn't really get it like you get it in your head. So an editor is going to be able to do a diagnosis. They're going to come up with a laundry list of fixes, and even more importantly, they're going to show you what's right. What shouldn't be rewritten, what shouldn't be revised, what can stay just as it is. And that's as important a professional opinion as the stuff to change is, in my experience.
So a development editor will mostly work on the content level and deal with plot structure, character development, theme, work on the scenes that are there to make sure that they actually relate to the theme and, you know, put your plot forward and create a forward momentum. A line editor is mostly, not always, but mostly somebody who will assume that all that developmental stuff has already been done and will now go down to the actual writing and focus on voice and style and the scene, making sure the narration and the language flow supports whatever, you know, the scene is trying to accomplish. And the last level, which is often called copy editing or even proofreading, although that there is still a little bit of a distinction. So copy editors, they won't really change any more content issues, and they won't really mess with voice or style. They will only make sure that grammar, punctuation, and spelling are in place, that the tools of your trade are in working order, if you will. Clearly, that is the last step because it is easiest and fastest to fix, grammar and punctuation. That's the last step you need to deal with. The first step should always be to make sure that you are okay at the content level, that your story works. As a writer, you can work with an editor at any time you want, at any time in that process. Whenever you feel that you cannot get any further by yourself, when you run against the proverbial wall, that is when you can contact an editor, and you will simply get different things out of the relationship with your editor, depending on what needs to be done. So I'm primarily a development editor, so most manuscripts come to me after there's a solid draft that's been written, but it is by no means polished. So usually people come to me before anyone else has read the manuscript. So maybe one or two friends have read it, but there's no other professional who's read it before. So I make sure that the story is tight enough and really that the vision that the writer had really is on paper. And a line editor will assume that that vision is on paper and will help communicate it best, and a copy editor will simply polish the manuscript and send it off.
So what an editing service costs is dependent on the amount of work being done. With any professional relationship, when you're hiring someone, you're paying for their labor, you're paying for their expertise. The reason it costs more to buy a toy house made out of wood than one made out of Legos is because of the time and the labor and the expertise that goes into it. So when you're perusing editors, when you're looking for an editor, try and always look for one that is either well reviewed or appears professional or is very open and honest about their rates up front. Where many people have problems is they go to They go to the cheap labor sites like Fiverr and they say, I need someone to edit my whole book for $5. Well, you can get that. And you get what you pay for. But on the flip side, you can also go to those sites and the same sites and find someone that says, I will developmental edit your book for $25,000. Well, okay, but for $25,000, it needs to come back like with gold covers. It's very easy to get, I don't want to say swindled, but it's very easy to make poor decisions when you order stuff, especially online. But it's also very easy to find reputable sources, either reviews or friends or other professionals, or to ask a prospective editor to say, you know, I believe I want to hire you for my first book, but let's try something smaller first to make sure that we fit. One thing that's very important in editor-author relationships is understanding how people appreciate their feedback. For instance, I've been a professional my entire adult life. I don't have emotional attachments to the things I write. So if I send something off to an editor and they come back and say, this is wrong, you're going to have to do it again. If I trust that editor, if I respect that editor, then I'm going to be like, well, okay, I have to do it again. Most people aren't me. Most people are writing their first book. Most people are writing the book they've been thinking about their entire lives. It's their baby. It's their extra child. It's wonderful. Asking someone else if your child is attractive is a very dangerous question. So you have to be careful that you're setting expectations and that you're prepared, if you're asking for it, for honest feedback. And also that you're very careful that you don't over or underpay for it. A good editor, a good freelance editor, will have a contract. You'll sign an actual legal document. It will have terms. You should read them, and it will, like any legal contract, it will be designed to protect both of you. It will be designed to protect you as the author, to make sure that the editor is not wasting your money, and the editor is designed to protect the editor from you, to make sure that you're not being unreasonable and making unreasonable requests or anything like that. So the financial aspects of any professional relationship sometimes get dicey, but in editing, because it's so often a freelance operation, you just have to pay a little more attention.